Welcome to Your Way Now, where Sue and Sarah, coaches supporting people living with cancer and those moving beyond it. Each episode shares real stories, expert insight, and gentle tools to help you feel more supported, physically, emotionally, and mentally. This is Your Way Now.
Get the strength you want and need from real stories and expert voices. It's time for Your Way Now.
Hello and welcome to Your Way Now. We, Sarah and I, Sue, are joined today by Nic Naish. Nic, you've got so many tools in your belt. How would you like to introduce yourself?
I suppose the thing I'm focusing on is my nutrition. So not my nutrition, but my nutrition for everyone else. So yeah, nutritionist will do. Okay. Will do nicely.
And how did you get to that title in the end? Because there was a bit of a change, wasn't there, along the way of careers?
Yeah, there was. I've always been interested in science. Did all the sciences at A level, but veered off because art was the easy, obvious. So I was doing medical illustration. Couldn't get a job in that. Ended up as a school teacher. Everyone said you should be a teacher, so I became a teacher. Which was fine when it was special needs teaching, and then I fell out of love with the job. Got probably too stressed at work. Ended up having cancer, age 39, breast cancer. 2 mastectomies, chemo, radio, and a whole load of tamoxifen. I decided I had to do something that I felt passionate about. Mm-hmm. And by that point, I had used food as a huge part of not the sole part, but a huge part of keeping me well for different things, from migraines to I was diagnosed with Crohn's at 23 and have had no surgery or medication. I've been able to control it. Wow. The jury's out if it was totally Crohn's, but it was an IBD, and I kept it mostly at bay with food. So it was a very logical thing post-cancer, having done voluntary work, to have a career swerve, not a total change, because I still wanted there very much to be a teaching element to it. But I went back to uni. I wanted to do exercise with cancer clients as well. So I had to do all my levels up to PT and then beyond. And then alongside it, the nutrition. So I'm cancer rehab specialist, but more recently because of...
So you'd successfully used managing your diet to manage a quite serious medical condition before you'd been diagnosed with cancer. Absolutely. And then were you able to keep that in mind and in practice through your treatment as well, or did that come...
I think I tweaked it further. But what I was very aware of, I couldn't shout from the hills, or the rooftops, this is the way you have to eat for cancer, or to avoid cancer, or to get better after cancer treatment, because it's anecdotal. So I knew I needed to study it. Okay. I also knew I needed to know the science, but it very much became, this is what you avoid for this condition. This is what you avoid. And that annoyed me, because food is a comfort for so many people that I felt, no, it has to be what you include, not what you avoid.
And with that, when you were going through cancer yourself, what did you find the medical professions sort of advised you to be doing or not to be doing in terms of your nutrition?
I was extremely lucky with the oncologist that I had. He was very newly qualified and eyes wide open and very interested in what I was doing, on the proviso that I fed back to him. And if there were any negatives that, don't just soldier through thinking you're doing the right thing, go back to him. And he was fantastic. But after 2 years, I had a change of oncologist, and it was the total flip side. And in no uncertain terms, I was told, what you eat has nothing to do with your health.
Yeah, and I've heard this so many times, and that's the point. You're sitting in the chemo unit even sometimes, and the nurses will sort of like go, "Yeah, just go home, do what you want, eat what you want. It's all fine, and just go and have the ice
even the trolley
burn
that comes round.
Yeah,
While you're having the chemo, you're plugged in.
Yeah,
and the sweet and biscuit trolley comes round.
It goes to that kind of disconnection, doesn't it, between professions, and perhaps a bit advice being given in one quarter, but that not being available in others.
It's not consistent.
Exactly. I don't know if you want to talk about when you had your recent surgery and the different approach that you found with the medical team that you had there.
Yeah.
That was something else, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
You said that was complete contrast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very
Do you want to
refreshing.
tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So, although my surgery was when I was 39, 15 years ago, I needed further surgery recently. And it was a long wait, 5 years, because of lockdown and everything else. And it became so bad that I had to go to East Grinstead for specialist plastic surgery. And I went along for the, what's it called? Pre-assessment. And I said, I'll be 20 minutes, knowing what it's usually like. I was 5 hours.
Wow.
And during that time, I was given information, both written and spoken about, eat this food and try not to drink this and drink more of this, and on the day do this. And it couldn't have been more different. It was so thorough. I'm not totally convinced that it's as thorough across the board at all hospitals, but at this particular hospital, because it is a specialist hospital, it was amazing. And I took part in the survey because of it. I said, this is how it should be, to do with exercise but especially nutrition. It was very different.
Yeah, because it's all about integrative approach, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Integrative medicine, for want of a better word.
It's making the surgeon's work so much easier, the anaesthetist's work. It was
Absolutely.
actually the anaesthetist that started all of this at the hospital. So it was, you spoke to the anaesthetist and the nutritionist at the same time.
That's really forward thinking.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And the proof of the pudding, I was in hospital 2 days. Predicted 6 days at other hospitals for this surgery, and 2 days, and I was out. Obviously, had to take it very easy for a while, but yeah, felt very equipped as well. And I know a lot of this stuff, but for people that didn't, they gave them the information and then said, and get in touch with us if none of this makes sense. We'll speak again.
Yeah. So we see you've got some tools down there, and you're holding a leaf.
Well,
so
I don't
fill me in.
do scripts.
No, neither do we. That's why I can't you tell.
My eyes are so dodgy. My eyes are so dodgy, it'd have to be so largely written. But once a junior school teacher, always a junior school teacher. So I tend to bring prompts. And my approach to nutrition is, I think, quite gentle, and become more gentle with every few years that I'm qualified. I am softening my approach. I don't know when this will be aired, but I don't want to do any traitor spoilers. But I think when I first became qualified, after years of not really fitting in, I suddenly found on my nutrition degree my tribe, my people, the people, like-minded people. And I became, from someone that was quite shy, into a total motor mouth about, oh yes, and I was that horrible know-it-all in the room, shouting loudly, oh no, you need to do this and you need to eat that. And it just reminded me of James when he got the dagger, for people that will make sense if you haven't watched it.
It's going to be a few months afterwards. They might have forgotten about James and the dagger by that point.
Slightly overexcited with this new knowledge. Let's put it that way.
Bit tiggerish.
Yeah. So, and how I feel my approach to nutrition is, hence the leaf, is we have to work with nature. We have to be more aware of, you know, the planet we're living in. Our homes are created so we could have the same ambient temperature all year round, and you know, the alarm clock's probably set for the same time all year round, and our food, don't even get me started on that. But I just feel with, you know, the thought of 1 in 2 people experiencing cancer is no coincidence that we've moved so far away from our natural cycles, natural food. And I just think the autumn leaf is what sums that up for me. So I can remember teaching children at school that they said, you know, where does the colour come from? And I said, well, it was always there. But there was always so much chlorophyll, green chlorophyll in that leaf, that the leaf appeared green. But this was there. And when the weather changes and the deciduous trees notice the change of weather, and they're pulling the chlorophyll back out of the leaves, down the branches, into the trunks and into the roots to store it for protection. That's nurturing itself. It knows that cycle, the only way to survive is to pull all that goodness in, just lose what you don't need, and just, you know, regroup, reset. And we need to do that. You know, we can't be expected. But, you know, we have mortgages, we have rent, we have whatever. So most of us has changed slightly since lockdown, but a lot of us have to keep the same cycle up 52 weeks a year. Well, a couple of weeks off on holiday. And your body can't just keep pushing through. And so for me, I always say to people, don't let food become just a project. I've done that, and I don't think it's wise for some people, and it rings alarm bells.
And what do you mean by that, food becoming a project?
When people take it to an extreme and they're literally measuring everything, weighing everything, measuring and weighing themselves, really monitoring their food to such a level that orthorexia is a concern. And I just think if you can just simply look and think, well, I can't read half of those things on that label, so it's not natural, it's not nature. And don't worry whether that apple's got more whatever in it and you know, that red grape's got more resveratrol in it. It doesn't matter. If it's natural, then it's going to be better. You know, better for you. And if it's seasonal, it's going to be even more of a superfood. You know, superfoods don't need to be shipped from far reaches. The blackberry from, you know, or the bramble from the bush is going to be better than a goji berry from wherever, you know. So I feel that nature, we need to think about how we set, and then you can see that it's not just about the food. Although I'm a nutritionist and I'd love for it to be all about the food, it isn't. It is about taking your foot off the gas during the winter months, and it is about the body being able to reset. And if you don't, and you just keep pushing through, you end up like me, age 39, going, yeah, I'm resilient, I can do this.
I can really, you know, sort of resonate with that, because I reached burnout on several occasions before I had several cancer diagnoses. So, you know, and they definitely link without a doubt.
Yeah. And my mother, so I'm one of at least 7 in my family. My mum was orphaned because of breast cancer. She has siblings, even her brother, with breast cancer. And my mum's health and lifestyle her lifestyle couldn't have been cleaner. But she was one of those that just kept pushing, kept doing. So for me, my approach and my advice to people is, if nothing else, just try and lead a more natural life.
So semi-hibernation with good food.
I'm going to bed.
Really attractive.
All
Yeah.
Should we just have a lie down on the sofa while we do
All
this
these
podcast?
people
Knock me out
not
until
going
March.
into work.
Yeah.
Well, Nick,
Nick
said,
Nick said it was good for me.
yeah.
Yeah. That
So
makes sense. Yes.
that to me is, if we're talking in general terms, obviously, it then is very interesting that two people can eat exactly the same foods and have very different outcomes. And that's where I get very excited about DNA testing. And I use that quite a bit in with my clients. It's such an insight to see, since your conception, how your body was going to react to certain things. It's kind of written in the stars, you know. It's so I love that side of it, and it ticks the need for some science for me.
So how does that link into day-to-day nutrition and what people should be doing for themselves, or what they can do for themselves?
So I always say when we get a DNA test results back, a third of it is so blatantly obvious, and most people will have already worked it out for themselves. Oh, I can't do bread, or I can't do dairy, or I can't do whatever. But when people say, I can't eat broccoli and I can't eat onions and I get diverticulitis with this and that, and I need a low FODMAP diet, I get concerned that people are cutting out very, very healthy foods that actually, without asking why. So come to somebody like me and have a consultation and see if they can work out which plant chemicals are always causing a problem. And you can do it through a consultation. Or you have a DNA test and find out, and then the result of the test will say, actually, there are various systems in your body that you just will not be able to pull enough vitamin D3, if you can call it a vitamin. It's a hormone, but we call it a vitamin. You can't pull enough vitamin D, even with enough sunshine and enough of the right foods. And then if you look at the fact that we live in the Northern Hemisphere and this person's vegetarian or vegan, then they're very much going to be a vitamin D issue or deficiency. So it's really very clear that there are some organ systems in the body that if you speak to someone like myself, you'll be able to work out what foods are either low, and then if they say, no, look at my food diary, I'm eating a ton of this, then you would know genetically they're not able to get it from in the mouth into actually using that particular vitamin or mineral or whatever to do the job that it's meant to do. And how I'm now using that, I've tried to condense. I've become my dad's full-time carer now. He has Alzheimer's, so I'm not able to work the same hours and just spread my net as wide. So I'm trying to be a bit savvy, work out what it is that I think is the root of all of most inflammatory conditions. And I think gut health and DNA, your genetics, are at the root of most inflammatory problems.
There's so much research coming out about gut health, isn't there now? And it's and how this just affects us generally.
I bought this because
That's sauerkraut.
Something else she picked up off the pavement. Yeah.
It could be. She could be pretending it's sauerkraut.
It is, yeah. No, this is a really good one actually from the farmer's market, and better than I make when I make my own. This is lovely, but you know, these are skills that we all did. Again, going back to the seasons, the harvest months need to see you through the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And we've lost some of those skills. Oh, that was the other thing with saying about harvest months. So I've managed to reverse my dad's type 2 diabetes. Again, I was told, at his age, don't worry, it's not an issue. And I thought, well, no, he's got wounds that aren't healing, and that's part and parcel. And I always say to people, think about it in nature. In the UK, we don't have bananas and all these real exotic fruit growing. So our fruit comes from berries, apples, pears. They're our sweet, apart from honey. That's kind of our nature's sweetest things. When do they come into being ripe? When can we harvest them? Well, at that time, late summer, beginning of autumn, you can eat them in abundance. And when you eat them, you are informing your body via insulin and other things, you are informing your body that you're about to go into winter. So stop, burning the fat, blooming well store it, because you're going to need it. And slow down, because well, surely it's coming into autumn. That's why we're eating fruit. So if you then start eating sugar the whole year round in the same equal amount, your body is going into winter. Better, start slowing down. Better store this fat. And I think, we've come away from that seasonal eating, and in doing so, the preservation of foods, a lot of those skills aren't commonplace now. They are in other countries, but in our countries, a lot of those have gone. And so many of them needed fermentation as part of the process. And eating those fermented foods is obviously, we know, so good for our gut health.
So it's almost like, from what you're saying, all makes perfect sense to me, but it's something that is happening and it is growing in prominence, but something that is going to take time, because people need to invest that time in finding out, learning different techniques, learning how to do these things, where convenience is, we've been so used to convenience being such a major factor in what we eat and how we eat, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So what would you say, what's the first thing that someone could do, apart from harvesting and freeze? Can they freeze if they're not sure about
absolutely
preserving?
No harm in freezing whatsoever. I think if you a lot of people like intermittent fasting. I'm quite happy with intermittent fasting, but I think when you think of your first meal, whenever that is, however many hours after you've woken up, there needs to be some protein in that meal. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't just be this modern, quick eating on the hoof, or a cereal or toast or a cereal bar or whatever. I think it needs to have some protein in it, and it needs to be quite a substantial meal. And I still think this breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince and supper like a pauper, it makes sense. There's logic there. Our lives don't work like that anymore. We're not coming in from the fields and having a lunch. We're usually at work, and we're probably not with our loved ones. We're, with colleagues. And then we want an evening meal, because that's time to catch up with people maybe, or kick your shoes off, stick the telly on. But within the parameters of modern living, I think we still have to take the essence of, okay, that first meal, the first meal that my stomach has received after however many hours of rest, needs to have all the food groups, and it needs to be clean, and it needs not just to be a sugar rush.
To set you up right for the day.
And just so that the body, it can start utilising, breaking down the food, So metabolism, and we know with the word metabolism, we want to have a healthy metabolism, is the balance of catabolism, breaking food down, and anabolism, building things up, like anabolic steroids. So catabolism still needs some energy, to break these foods down. We need, within our meal, and it happens naturally if you think of most balanced meals, you've got everything in there to power the breaking down of the food, the carrying the fat-soluble vitamins around the body. You think of an egg, vitamin D rich. Its yolk is fat and its white is protein. Vitamin D is fat-soluble, unlike vitamins B and C. So they don't wash around the blood, it needs fat to carry it around the body. And so eating an egg with a little bit of greenery of some description, or an apple or whatever, you've got a balanced meal. It doesn't have to be labour intensive, but suddenly you're able to move all of those vitamins, minerals, the macros, the protein, fats and carbohydrates, all of those can be utilised immediately. If you just have carbs, you're just going to literally get a sugar rush and then a crash.
Well, I want to talk quickly about sugar, and we have probably only got a few minutes left before we need to wrap up, but sugar, I think it's just such a big subject, isn't it? And what really confuses me, so I'm sure it must confuse the listeners, is this thing about, obviously you've got your refined sugars, as we know, like our table sugars, our white sugar and everything else, and our fruit sugars, and people say that sugar is sugar. So what's your take on that? Is sugar sugar, and what should people be eating, and what shouldn't they be eating?
Obviously, if you're type 2 diabetic or type 1 diabetic, then, a medjool date, honey, very ripe banana, they're all sugar, and they're all going to raise that glycemic load hugely. But if we're assuming we're not talking diabetic, we're just talking about the average person, how they take on board. When you eat fruit, especially if you eat fruit from this country, we don't grow bananas. We grow the berries, the stone fruits, apples, pears. They are loaded with other plant chemicals. If you eat the skin, so give it a scrub and eat the skin, you're having, the fibre, the prebiotics, everything is there. So it is far more balanced. It is not just sugar. Your body, starting from your teeth and saliva with the amylase, everything is breaking that down slowly. And that apple, eaten slowly and mindfully, hopefully, is going to encourage just small amounts of insulin to be released, and it will be able to affect the sugars there and utilise them, store them in your liver or store them in your muscles, and it can be used. Whereas if you grabbed one of these bars that's meant to be, breakfast in a bar type thing, it's more than likely going to be refined carbohydrates, majority. And it still might have a fruit thing, but the refining of it has broken all of those large molecules that our teeth and our saliva was having to break down. That's already been done in a factory, and it's going to go in and then just crash, cascade these simple sugars. There's nothing complex about it. It's all simple sugars. And the insulin can't match that. There's no way it can match it. And it will attempt to until it can't, and then people become diabetic, type 2 diabetic. But there is nothing wrong with fruit. We shouldn't fear fruit. I always say try and aim for 8 or 9 portions of vegetables and fruit a day. And I do word it vegetables and fruit because I think if we could have 3 green veg, 3 coloured veg, and then 3 fruit, that would be perfect. And all of the goodness that's accompanying that fruit has healing qualities. But it's the refined sugars that really are going to affect us in a negative way, because we don't have to do anything to take them on board. Just open our mouth and down it goes.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for all the really informative information that you've given us today. Let's wrap this up with what your top tip for anyone going through, and if they're listening, I mean, most of our listeners will either be caring, I'm sure, for people with cancer, or they may have cancer themselves. What would your top tip be for our listeners today?
Okay. When it comes to chemo, I think they have a handle on nausea far better than they used to, but you don't necessarily want to be sitting in a house with a slow cooker on, with the smells wafting through when you're nauseous. So if anyone ever says, oh, what can I get you? Box of chocolates, flowers, whatever, say, oh, if you've got a slow cooker, you couldn't do me a meal, a stew type meal up, portion it up, put it into little things, and I'll put it in my freezer. And I just think everybody wants to help and feels redundant. And if you can stick bone broth into that stew, stick some ginger in and some other,
That's
things.
my favourite. I love that. I love bone broth. I love it with ginger, garlic.
It's so
turmeric.
healing.
Yeah, make my own.
Yeah, I do. My house always smells because I put garlic in my bone broth.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, garlic,
Then
everything.
Everyone goes, oh, what are you
Yeah,
cooking?
coriander.
Exactly. But when you are under the weather, chemo, or for whatever reason, sometimes you don't want those food smells wafting around, or you can't even be bothered to chop everything to put it in a slow cooker, as easy as it can be. So that's always my advice, is to say to people when they want to offer some help, take the first box of chocolates, go, oh, I tell you what though, you couldn't rustle up a whatever, I'd love it, and then I can put bits, because you don't always have a big appetite. And you don't always know whether you want it or not. So something that you can cook up in bulk and then freeze. And if
So
it's got
can you
broth,
buy the bone broth
you
from Tesco's or something?
There are 2 things now.
There might be some additives.
Yeah,
that's true.
there are some really good companies, but you're going to be paying £6, £7, £8 for a pouch, and that will be one batch of food and it's gone. I get from one of my supplements companies some desiccated bone broth, and that's great because a teaspoon into filtered water is, far more economical. It's more expensive, obviously, than the £8 investment, but it lasts a long time. And the companies that do them tend to be very, very transparent about the welfare of the animals and how organic it is and everything like that. So that's very easy, and that you can even, there's one that has some lemon flavour to it that you can just make as a hot drink.
Sound like my kind of cooking, I have to say.
Yeah. it
Rather than
is
boiling something for hours.
Yeah. I've
Quick.
got into the habit, so I've always got one bone
Yeah.
broth on the go, but it takes a while to get
sometimes it's
into
about
those
feeling
habits.
confident about trying that sort of thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are. I would actually recommend more the desiccated one because
Sounds like a good starter.
it really is, and it's always there. You can, you can suddenly think, oh, I'm going to be really healthy. Oh, I haven't got bone broth. And, I'll just go for my normal then. Whereas if you've got a pot of this
That's interesting, yeah.
in the cupboard, it's there.
No excuses.
No excuses.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Nic, for sharing all
very
this
welcome.
wealth of knowledge and experience with us. How will people find you if they want to contact you after this podcast?
So I am on Facebook under Nic Naish Nutrition, but email me is probably the easiest. I'm nick@nicnaish.com. It
Well,
couldn't be easier.
We'll share the links in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So if anybody here is watching and you want to find out more about Nic, then we will share her details in the show notes below. So do go on there and find her, because I'm sure, I mean, this podcast, I'm sure, could have gone on for a long time, because it's such an interesting conversation.
I haven't even talked about the vagus nerve.
I know. Well, maybe we'll do a part 2 on the vagus nerve. I think that sounds like an interesting one.
Yeah,
we were talking about that.
We
just
were,
earlier.
yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nic.
You are very welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so
It's been
much.
lovely.
Get the strength you want and need from real stories and expert voices. It's time for Your Way Now.
Thank you for listening to Your Way Now. If you have a story you'd like to share, or would like to be a guest, or have ideas about what would be helpful to hear on future episodes, we'd really love to hear from you. Please remember you're not alone on this journey, and your voice really does matter. So until next time, this is Your Way Now.